such as myself at the time. On the other side of this page, there's this terrific face of this monster. And just know how to really process what I was looking at. But my parents just so happened, they were walking by the study, and I can recall my mother looking in, seeing me with my mouth open. She walks in and she finds out what I was looking at. She realizes I came across the photograph of Emmett Till. And as she looks over to my father, and he comes in, and they both look at each other, and they say to themselves, or say to me, I should say, we need to tell him the story. So throughout my life, the name Emmett Till kept resurfacing. When I got into high school, I was interracially dating. So the first thing my parents would tell me before I left the house at night was, don't let what happened to Emmett Till happen to you. So it became an educational tool to teach me about the racism, of course, that still exists in this country today. But I have to say my defining moment in my life that put me on this journey to fight for justice for Emmett Till and for those who cannot speak for themselves had to come 2 weeks before my high school graduation, where I was at a pre-graduation party for the local high schools in the Baton Rouge area. It was at that time I was assaulted by an undercover police officer for dancing with a white classmate of mine. And that's what spurred me into wanting to fight injustice. But I felt the only way that could be even more possible is by becoming a part of the system. So I began to study criminal justice at Southern University of Baton Rouge in hopes of becoming a civil rights attorney. But then during my junior year, my childhood friends moved to New York City and started their own film production company. And that's how I was introduced to film. But it was one night they asked me, Keith, if there was something you would like to produce as a feature film, what would that be? The first thing that came to my mind, of course, was the story and the name that I heard most of my life, Emmett Till. So it started off, me going to one direction, but being introduced to something different, which allowed me to become this unintentional filmmaker I am. And so when I decided to take on this task to try to tell the story of Emmett Till, the first thing I said to myself was, I cannot tell the story without the family and the witnesses if they're still here. So the first thing I did in late '95 was reached out to Mother Mobley, the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. And it was through that relationship that which bloomed and lasted for 9 years until she unfortunately passed away, that put me on this path and allowed me to produce the film, The Untold Story of Emmett Louis Till, which a number of your viewers may have seen before or seen earlier today. That process of producing that film took me 9 years to make. The question many people ask me all the time, why did it take that long? Well, it took that long because it took some time for the witnesses themselves to feel comfortable with me enough to trust me so I could tell their story. And so it's been a long,
found your calling for sure.
Yes, I did get a chance to represent Simeon, to counsel him, advise and counsel him, and support the family in their continuous efforts to get justice for Emmett.
Mhm.
And so I'm walking this walk with my brother, Keith Beauchamp. I'm walking this walk with the spirit of our ancestor, Sister Emmett Till Mobley. I'm walking this walk with our ancestor, Mose Wright, and all those who continue to seek justice. And nothing that has come up lately has deterred me or will deter me, not the closing of a case, not the decision that culprits are going to walk free. Nothing will deter me from sticking with you, Keith, until we get justice.
And in case you haven't heard, and I'm pretty sure most of you have, Donald Trump's Justice Department did close the case today.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no surprise, because we definitely are in a hostile environment, but that was shored up by those who look like us, who have no courage.
Mm-hmm.
The spineless folks who look like us, who could have done something, who could have stood there in the gap and did not do that, were not accountable to their own people. That also helped to usher in this latest decision.
Absolutely.
The leading by avoidance, the practice of avoidance as leadership, the lack of accountability and the cowardice way in which some of the officials who could have done something, who could have leveraged another story, another outcome, but did not.
I couldn't have said it better. It's incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we hear from our next panelist? Anyone? We don't have an order.
Yes, I'll go. It appears that my laptop keeps taking my myself off mute. I'm not doing it, so I guess that means that I'm supposed to speak. My name is Marquise Hunt, and echoing the words of Attorney Jaribu Hill, I think that it's important for young people. I'm obviously the youngest one on this call. I think some of you might get away with it as well, but you know, Generation Z. And I think when we recognize the role that we play in this movement, when our elders talk about the torch being passed to us to continue this work, I think it's also important for us to educate ourselves about the system that we face. And it's unfortunate that for over 65 years, that on this day in particular, that the Civil Rights Division of the United States Justice Department decided to close the biggest case that really galvanized the civil rights movement, a case where a 14-year-old boy lost his life at the hands of white supremacy, racism, bigotry, and hate in this country. And it just shows us that our Justice Department, whether it be in 2020, because we can often put the blame on Donald Trump, but it appears for over 65 years that our justice system has failed us. And I think that it's important for us to recognize their role in this, in protecting white supremacy and those who continue to kill off Black and brown people. And so one of the things that I will say is that I think young people recognize the importance of continuing this fight for justice, not only for Emmett Till, but for a number of Black and brown people who, where there's some contrast, have lost their lives at the hands of police brutality, but recognize that it's the same system that allows the officers who have killed Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, and so many other folks, and even those who tried to murder Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, to let them continue to remain free in this land of the free and the home of the brave. But yet there's consequences for Black folks who decide to sell marijuana, or for some reason might write a bad check, and yet end up with life in prison. And so I think that we have to take a deeper look into what our role is. And one of the things that I often say is that in order for us to get justice, activism and advocacy have to be hand in hand. And so we have a lot of work to do. And of course, one of the biggest things is to make sure that we show up to the polls in November, not just for the presidential election, but for our local elections as well. And it doesn't just stop after that, because we have a lot of folk to hold accountable. And the first folks that we need to, in some cases, start holding accountable are folks who look just like me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Is Ray Metoyer? Ray, are you on the call? Well, let's go with the next panelist then.
This is Dale. I'll go ahead and go. So I'm Dale Killinger, 22 years with the FBI, and in 2004 or 5, whatever year it was. Keith remembers better than me. It was 2004. I was assigned to be the case agent on the Emmett Till investigation, and I got to meet Keith Beauchamp for the first time. And he really assisted in the entire thing. I think it's important for everyone to understand some of the nuances that go on with such an investigation. This started because of Keith and Alvin Sykes and the family, Senator Schumer, other activists that were pressuring the Department of Justice, but more than the Department of Justice, the local district attorney. Because in the end, this is a state matter. It's really not a federal civil rights matter because the civil rights statute doesn't cover 1955. And so the work I did investigating the murder and the kidnapping all went to the district attorney, and it's the district attorney's decision to put it in front of the grand jury like we did in 2005 or 6, whatever year it was. It's a blur. And it's also their decision, I guess, now in this environment, I would assume, to decide whether they were going to represent that or not. And Justice and the FBI's closure of the case, I'm assuming, is acknowledgement that the local district attorney isn't going to take any action. That would be my guess. I can't speak for that. I think one of the things that struck me, and I won't go into the ins and outs of the investigation and how successful we were or weren't, but I think what struck me when, the theme for this justice conversation, when I first met Simeon Wright and Wheeler Parker and Crosby Smith in Chicago, they told me, that even the family did not talk about Emmett Till's murder. They had talked to Keith, but they talked very rarely amongst themselves or in public about the murder. They left that to Mamie, and I found that quite stunning. He was a young man who was ripped from their family under these horrible circumstances, and they had lived with it and lived with these pieces of books and film that weren't actually all that accurate all the time and were somewhat sensational occasionally, but they still didn't really talk about it. They had family members who gave bad information. I found that quite astounding, but in a very short order. And I like to think, in part due to the work we were doing, they started to talk. Eventually, Wheeler and Simeon, when he was around, they would go talk to school children. I know Wheeler still does today. The county of Tallahatchie County issued an apology to the family. Those things were unheard of prior to the opening of the case. And certainly it's not all due to the opening of the case. It's due to the attention that everyone gave the investigation and the murder and the tragedy that is what happened to Emmett Till. So fast forward to this year, and there we are with Black Lives Matter Plaza, the fence around the White House, and Emmett Till's face plastered on that fence, right? As a reminder to every one of these generations, what the prior generations went through. And I'm a man of privilege. I grew up in an area in Pennsylvania where we didn't have many persons of color of any kind. I had, I think, one black kid in my elementary school. And I'm a person of privilege by my status and, law enforcement and et cetera, not just race. So it's very difficult for me at times to put myself in the shoes of a black person, a black man in particular, in the environment that was the Mississippi Delta in 1955. But I've come to respect that for what it likely was, and also that the biases that got introduced through the different perspectives that come. And so if there is any form of justice, I hope that justice is that the legacy of Emmett is on the tongues and in the minds of everyone who remember what happened to him, and that sparked a next generation and a generation beyond. And then, Trayvon Martin, being compared to Emmett Till and even today. So if there's justice in that form, I think, it is something to be thankful for. Certainly justice in the courtroom appears to have eluded us at this point, but you never know.
You never know, but I just would like to put forth this question to you. Do you think there will ever be justice for Emmett Till? Yes or no? Why? Why not?
Well, I think when you talk about courtroom justice, my knowledge of the case is there's only one individual likely culpable at this point, and that she is of poor health, and that it is very challenging for attorneys to charge persons in their later years, and if they're not exactly in their best mental state. I don't know that for a fact. That's what I understand about Carolyn Bryant. So I think it's highly unlikely at this point that you will see a criminal court case filed. That doesn't mean it's impossible. There needs to be significant enough new evidence for the DA to consider, and then the DA can always go back. It's a murder, and certainly with a murder, there is no statute of limitation, and you never know what turns up. We found a trial transcript. We found 2 young boys who were accosted by Roy Bryant and Carolyn Bryant. One of them kidnapped briefly. We found a likely murder weapon. 50 years later, we found pieces of evidence people thought were long lost. So there's no telling what could turn up tomorrow. And we always should hold out hope that one more definitive piece of evidence will turn up that will help in a criminal conviction. But I'm a realist. That's not the most likely outcome, but the good Lord has spoken in many ways before. And we can always hold out hope and prayer that would happen.
Well, we thank you so much. Thank you so
I
much.
just add one other in support of what Dale just said. Could I just jump in for a second?
Please.
This is Jaribu. I also wanted to ask about the warrant that was originally issued for Carolyn Bryant back when the lynching first occurred. I believe the charge was accessory after the fact related to a kidnapping. Were there other charges? And what about whatever happened with that warrant? She was never served. All those years ago, she never was served. That warrant was not served on her because they said that she was a mother who had children. And so there's that. And then also, do we know what went into the investigation? Because one of the demands that the family is making is that there be full and total transparency in terms of the scope of the investigation that they claim they did started 3 years ago when the case was reopened. We still don't know what the scope of that investigation was and what led to the conclusions that they've reached that they're going to close the case.
So on your first point, I conducted that work, and I could not find any definitive evidence other than references to an arrest warrant. There were certainly references to an arrest warrant for Carolyn Bryant, but I could not find an actual arrest warrant or any evidence, any written evidence that would give me any more clarity about an arrest warrant. Certainly it was never served, as you said. There was even an FBI report from Memphis, which is the field office that covered the area at the time, back to FBI headquarters that said there was an arrest warrant filed on her. So I expect certainly that there was an arrest warrant issued, but I could find no written documentation. But, that's just the nature of the challenge that we run into with a 50-year-old case. There was no real investigative case filed. There was no real court file other than a couple of documents filed into the clerk. There was just really nothing there. We got very fortunate in finding a trial transcript copy from a gentleman that we now all have available to us if we want to read it. So very, very difficult to do. And wish I had a better answer other than we don't know. On the second point, I can tell you that when we conducted the initial investigation, we myself, the district attorney from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, we traveled to Chicago and we did a presentation for the family of the investigation and the facts that we found. I can't state what has occurred with this current investigation. I retired 2 years ago, and even then, even if I had been involved, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say. I would expect that they'll try and be transparent, but if you were going to talk to Wheeler Parker or one of the family members, they certainly could tell you what their interactions are. They're not sworn to any kind of secrecy or anything like that.
This is Janice McDonald. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, Janice. Welcome.
Thank you. And it's really nice to see some old friends here, Jaribu and Keith. I would like to know whether or not there was any investigation, to your knowledge, of Klan activity anywhere in that area. I mean, even that early Mississippi certainly had various kind of Klan activity, and White Citizens Council were just starting to be formed. And in the research that we've done at the Cold Case Justice Initiative, they clearly had a very strict hierarchy of approval for any kind of actions. And they viewed that it is their territory, so that anybody in the territory who took any kind of action like this would have been, frowned upon without going through that approval process. To me, it looks like that's something that would hold a higher ups accountable too, because if they got pre-approval, if they got any facilitation pre the murder of Emmett Till, that's activity that could still be followed up on. And I was going to talk about that in terms of domestic terrorism, because if you as the FBI had approached this from the same methodology as the unit that does domestic terrorism, you could focus on the individuals that are alive today, knowing that they were KKK then, and investigate their activity to tie them to this. There's so many different ways that the FBI, I remember talking to Agent Peoples, who was in charge of the cold case unit early on. We were in J. Edgar Hoover's old office in the Department of Justice. And I said to him then, why aren't you approaching this like domestic terrorism? Why not? He said, no, that's a terrorism unit. We don't do that. That's a problem with this. It's been treated in a whole different way.
So that's
a question.
I can assure you that I exhausted every possible methodology and resource to determine if the Ku Klux Klan was active and involved in Emmett Till's murder. We certainly had those allegations. We heard those allegations. We did extensive research in the FBI files. We checked with Southern Poverty Law Center. We, many other places, and documentary filmmakers Keith gave us data. Book writers gave us information, and we had confidential informants who provided us information, but in the end, could not show any definitive link to the Klan or the Citizens Councils to Roy and JW and their family. We did have some very interesting information about the support that they had for the brothers. So
after the fact. Mm-hmm.
After the fact and during the trial and stuff like that. Right. The raising of money, but there was also some other efforts to possibly help them. I was very, very aware of that, and from a guy from Pennsylvania, right, and being introduced to the South and the Citizens Councils, I was very conscious of that. Roy Bryant was a paratrooper. The head of the Citizens Council was also a paratrooper. It's a very small community there. I always felt they probably knew each other, at least to some degree. So it was always on the radar. But I will tell you that the majority of the activity of the FBI in 1955 was around the communist threat. And the communists were sending reporters to the trial every day. So there's lots of paperwork regarding that. But I will tell you, the file itself is over 8,000 pages deep. The report you see online is just a very short summary of all the 8,000 pages. And I was not restricted in any way, shape, or form. There was nothing I asked for that I didn't get.
No.
If I needed to go to Seattle to go interview someone, I went to Seattle and it was approved. And you got to understand, we don't schedule our interviews. We just show up at the door. The Bureau let me fly to Seattle just on the hope that whoever I was going to interview was going to be home, right? So there was nothing we were refused.
But would you agree? I'm sorry. Would you agree, though, that it was a kind of thing the Klan in every territory viewed it as their territory, and that any action was taken, that they would punish somebody if they had to for not getting approval? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. That is exactly on the money.
Janice, could you introduce yourself
Yeah.
and tell us who you are? And because we missed that with your question, so it's important for people to know who you are.
Okay. I'm Janice McDonald. I was one of the co-founders and co-director of the Cold Case Justice Initiative at Syracuse University College of Law, where I was a law professor, and Professor Paula Johnson and I have worked together in the last, I think we started this in 2007 with a case in Louisiana, and representing families throughout the country, trying to help them get the district attorneys, the U.S. Attorneys in the various locations, and the Justice Department to take these cases on. And we merged from one family and finding then 15 other cases in that area of Louisiana, and then across to Natchez and worked with some of the families there. And then we began to realize that there's never been a full accounting of the number of people who were killed during the civil rights era. And so our phase 2 really went into starting to identify some of those that were not on the list that the FBI received of unsolved civil rights crimes. And we eventually turned over a list of about 200 that were not on their list. And the Justice Department at that time really wasn't very happy to receive the list. They were busy trying to close these cases. And even the ones that they said hadn't been closed yet, I think there were preliminary decisions that they weren't going anywhere with those. Most of the reports that they issued in the more recent times, and I'm not talking about you, Agent Killinger, but they did not, they were very different from the original files. There was not much new information, and yet we found new information and passed that on. Nothing has happened on the 200 that we submitted to them in 2012. And we've continued to find more names and try and work with more of the families. And I've been really honored to work with the Emmett Till family and with the Moore's Ford family in Georgia. That's 1954 with the murder of 4 individuals who were thrown off the bridge at Moore's Ford. And they're still trying to get justice. But should I talk about what I wanted to talk about on this? Is that okay right now? Or am we? Yes?
I thought you had another question, but I wanted people to know who you were before that. But did conclude your question with Agent Killinger, and then you can maybe next you can talk about what you want to talk about. Is that okay, John?
That's fine.
I can sit down with and interview you forever there, Mr. Killinger.
I know we're going to have one. We're going to actually have one with him. He has just been so, how can I say it? Given his responsibility, I think I've found that through Keith and others that, there's some people that take their jobs very seriously and are very, very diligent in it. And I'm not saying anything about anybody else, but what I know of him is that that's to be true about him. And he's, never said anything, to me that would give me any different kind of idea, but, it would I'll tell you, that's why we kept working hard, because I know we have a responsibility too. And as he mentioned earlier, you know, the families didn't talk about it. You know, when you're in trauma and when you have post-traumatic stress, when you have grief, it's hard to fight through that. And it's hard to, you know, there was shame, a lot of shame back then too. And so as African Americans who were held down, to expect them to be so forthcoming is a little bit unrealistic given the time. But those times have changed. And so you will hear family speaking out, you will hear family demanding. And I just appreciate his support, Dale, your support, and all the others too. So please move forward with your question, Janice, and I'll be quiet.
Well, one other question, and that is about the utility of specialized regional task forces. This is not something that one agent could do. I mean, to work on one case, you probably needed a whole lot of other help. And in our experience with the cases in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Georgia, the agents were really trying, they were trying to work, but they were also assigned to the bank robberies, to foreign terrorism, to everything else that happened in a very, you know, in Louisiana, with huge districts. And so to me, it was like, we kept arguing for units like the ones that focus on child trafficking or drug units, where you have specialized agents who have support and have had have a definite budget and support that they can zero in on this case. Did you have that kind of support? How many kind of people did you have? And do you think that's a good idea going forward on the Emmett Till prosecution?
So it's a bit of a split answer.
Yeah.
A, I had all the support I needed. B,
Yeah.
The way we approached it was an extremely small team, and I'll tell you why. C, did I have to work other stuff? Occasionally that did happen, but it was rare. I did have one incident where I was, at one moment in the Till case, where I was assigned in a very large white-collar crime case, and it was going to consume all my time. And I literally had to have a sit down with the SAC, the guy in charge, and say, I can do one or I can do the other. I can't do both. And they allowed me to continue on the Till case. The reason that we went with a very small team, and by very small, I mean me, Lent Rice, a retired FBI agent who grew up in the Mississippi Delta, is from Sumner. And then some part-time support with some highway patrol resources who grew up in the Delta. But 95% of the interviews I did myself. And the reason for that is you were starting to learn about the Mississippi Delta, Glendora, Sumner, Tallahatchie County in 1955. So
Right.
now I used to be able to tell you every plantation on Highway 59 or 49 and which one came first and which one came next and where all the stores were and where the families lived in Glendora. You cannot convey that to someone else easily, right? So that's the reason I traveled. Typically FBI agents will cut a lead to Detroit. A Detroit agent will go out and cover the lead. That's not what I did in Emmett Till. I flew to Boston, I flew to Chicago, I flew to Seattle. I flew wherever I needed to go because I couldn't convey that local knowledge that I had gained through all these interviews. And so we had great success. That doesn't mean it can't work in task force environments, because I've worked in task force environments as well. And if everyone's devoted and focused,
Right.
and you can share that information, absolutely. And in fact, it's probably a better outcome because you can use, 4 eyes are better than 2, 6 eyes are better than 4.
Right.
And certainly more brains are better, right? So you can start to understand nuances and approach people differently, right? I'm a white guy, I'm from Pennsylvania. My approach to somebody in the Delta may not be as palatable as others. I didn't find that to be that challenging. I did have a couple occasions where people didn't want to talk to me, or I got what I considered flat out lies. But it's a way to do it. I think the challenge is, now you're talking organizationally. How do you get an organization to devote time and money. I think your best hope is fight to keep that agent like 80% on the case while it's being worked hard and heavy. And that's probably the best you're going to be able to hope for.
It's one of the things that we found in the ones in Louisiana and the other side of Mississippi, pretty well, it isn't that much further, was that they would assign young agents who really they wanted to work hard, but they knew nothing about the history. So someone assigned to murders that happened in 1964 during Freedom Summer, and they, the first time I sit down with them, they don't know anything about 1964. They don't know about Freedom Summer. They don't know about any of the famous cases. You start talking about Philadelphia, Mississippi, they don't know about that. And I mean, it's not, I guess it's not their fault, but it is their fault. But it also is the FBI's fault.
I knew nothing about the Mississippi Delta.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about Jim Crow in 1955 when I started. I mean, I knew it existed, but I didn't know how awful it was.
Right.
FBI agents are highly intelligent generally and quick learners. So I wouldn't let that discourage you. I think you get discouraged if you're 6-8 months in and now they really just still don't know. They haven't taken the time to educate. That's a different challenge, right?
Right. The other thing was that they kept switching agents. So you'd have an agent, and these are long cases. These are not cases that are going to get solved. I had to convince my law students that they weren't going to solve in a summer in Mississippi. They weren't going to solve a murder. And it took a long time. But we'd get an agent. We got one terrific agent who worked very hard. She was really excellent. And then they move her because that's the way you go up the ranks in the FBI. But it's not exactly the way. Someone has to start all over with the case.
Challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
This is for Agent Killinger. What does it take for Black and brown people in this country to get justice? And I ask that question because it appears that for a 14-year-old boy and over 65 years, the excuse as to why a woman who lied in this case can't be arrested and sent to jail is because she's elderly, but yet I've seen a number of Black and brown folks over the age of 60 be sent to prison for things that they allegedly committed years ago. And are we really taking these investigations seriously? And I ask that question sincerely, simply because I think that we talk about, as Ms. Janice said, it's not going to be solved over, over a summer, but yet here we are 65 years to the day, and absolutely nothing has happened. But we have a woman who lied and said that Emmett Till did something, which is really no reason as to why Emmett Till should have been killed in the first place. And so what does justice for Black and brown people look like from a justice system that a number of Black and brown families, whether it be from Sandra Bland to Trayvon Martin to George Floyd, call on the justice system to do this very intentional work, but yet the answers that we get fall on deaf ears?
So I think you're actually saying two different things. The first I will tell you is, like I said earlier, I wasn't restricted in any way, shape, or form from following every logical lead in the Emmett Till investigation. The FBI devoted every single resource it could or needed to investigate the Emmett Till case. Separately from that is the justice system. I agree wholeheartedly that the justice system is broken, that a person without means is arrested and is unlikely to get a fair shake because they can't afford a defense attorney when the government has all the resources to bear on that person, whatever the crime may be. But it disproportionately affects those without means, which is principally, quite often minorities, right? Persons of color. So I agree completely. My wife and I have had a lot of conversations about this very topic. She is extremely disturbed by the number of people on death row that are cleared by DNA, right? So I don't mean to cut you off, and I think we all understand that. But what I'm asking is, what does it take for Black and brown people in this country who, again, call on our justice system to do the right thing? It's clear what
white people in this country have been doing to us, whether that be from Emmett Till to police brutality and all these things that are being caught on tape. What does it take for us to get justice? I understand your theory and your feelings, you know, but what does the Justice Department think that justice is? Because if closing the case after 65 years and no one has been held accountable for it, I don't call that justice at all.
I can't disagree, but it takes voting and changing our system. This is an ecosystem of things. It's education, it's the justice system, it's economics, and that we can't just change one thing. It's very, very intertwined, and it's awful. I can't answer for the Justice Department today. I can't answer for the district attorney. The district attorney makes that call, and it takes voting and it takes changing the system we have.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to,
John?
Make a comment as well.
John, oh, I'm sorry. Can I just interject, John? There were a couple of questions that came through on our Facebook. We want to make this interactive as well.
absolutely.
And so should we hold those to the end or just ask those now and allow our panel to discuss, and then we can go into those questions? Because we got a lot of them.
We could probably open it now because we have Dale here, and he's full of knowledge, and we do have some other panelists that want to get in, but why don't we open it now to some of those questions? At this
Okay.
time.
So thanks for your patience, panelists. We have one question that said, is this still relevant to call the Mississippi Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, and email and call the District Attorney, Dwayne Richardson, to demand justice for Emmett Till and charge Carolyn Bryant with murder?
Well, I'd like to take a stab at that. I absolutely think it's relevant, and I think we should lift up the demands of the family, that there be full transparency, that we know what was entailed in the investigation, what were the layers that they piled on top of each other, if they did, who were the new witnesses that might have emerged, were there any other culprits that are identified, because it was a mob lynching. We keep focusing on, and we should never take our eyes off of Carolyn Bryant. And I just want to share one quick thing. I actually talked to Jim Hood when he was the Attorney General. I asked him in a public meeting of the NAACP why Carolyn Bryant could not have been gotten on conspiracy charges. And what I said to him was, both of us went to law school, and we know in criminal law 101, the conspiracy theory, the spoke, the wheel and the spoke, how you can only get out of a conspiracy if you break away from it and say, this is illegal, I'm going to the authorities. She did not do that. She cooperated, and her cooperation, her fingering Emmett, led to his death. Why can't you get her? He tells me, and this is what he said. He said that they were not able to prove that she knew when he was abducted that he would be killed. So therefore, they couldn't link her to the actual murder because they couldn't really prove her intent. And we see this so often in these cases. And we also see the connection to the Klan, the institution of the Klan, to many of these cases. And a lot of times, like even with Bryant and Milan, very few folks want to reference them in terms of being possible Klan members. How is that so divorced from their behavior? And that is what the Klan was about then and what it is about today. But that was his response to me when I asked him, why couldn't she be charged with conspiracy to commit murder or conspiracy to commit a kidnapping?
But, and also, Jaribu, there's also getting around the fact that sometimes conspiracy has a 5-year statute of limitations. There's also the principal, the agent who's in preparation of the crime, so a principal who acts to support the facilitation of the crime. So plans, or sounds like conspiracy, but it's another way around because they are considered murderers. They are not, they have no statute of limitations. So I don't know about Mississippi on that specific question, but it's a way around it in some states.
It's really not just Mississippi. I think conspiracy as a practice and a theory is pretty much the same throughout the Dred Scott Law School institutions, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, back in the day and today, those issues never were explored. Mamie Till did not get the deference and the respect that Carolyn Bryant got when they said she's a woman with children. Well, Mamie was a woman with one child.
Yeah.
And there's always been a double standard when these cases are looked at. Our lives just absolutely do not matter. And I think we have to continue to hold people's feet to the fire. We have to ask for, we have to demand full transparency. We have to demand to know exactly what went into the investigation. I appreciated what Dale said about what happened when he worked on the other investigation in 2004. That same protocol should be followed today so that the family members know, and there's no closure, by the way. If they think that because they've announced closure, that there's closure, there is no closure. And the problem with folks who are satisfied with the system, they often say, oh yes, there's closure. There's no closure. There's no closure just because they closed the case. And they closed it many times before. And each time they've closed it, they've been forced to reopen. They're gonna be forced again and again and again. And I wish Keith would weigh back in, because some of the strategic ways that led to the reopening the first couple of times was through the work that this young man did, the research that he did. And I learned about all of these cases through his work in Murder in Black and White, the Morris Ford murders of the two couples that were placed at gunpoint on their knees and assassinated. I learned about these cases and it was all connected. And he actually put Emmett, even though the case was not considered cold anymore, he was able to put Emmett's case in the Murder in Black and White piece as well. So,
Keith, you want to step in here?
Yes, I just would like to say this, and Dale, don't get upset with me if I say some things that we've been trying to keep under wraps for some time. But I do have my personal opinion about where we at with this case at this point. Hearing, and if it's true that this case is really closed, it doesn't really bother me much, to be honest with you. They can say whatever they want to say. We could still work together and make sure we find some type of evidence that could prompt the reactivation of the case again. But I do have to say this. The 2004 investigation, we did amazing work, amazing work. I really believe that the public should have an opportunity to really look at that investigation. When Dale said he left no rocks unturned, when he was out there really investigating, he was. And I was on him, trust me. I was not gonna let this just fall on the wayside and just allow, the FBI to run amok and do their own thing with this case. I was at his side most of the time. We communicated often. It was a very extremely rare relationship. They had never really had that with anyone, before. That led me to continue to work with the FBI further on these investigations. But what I want to say is, and I know we just spoke about conspiracy. There is no conspiracy to the murder of Emmett Till. Just want to put that out there. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we were able to identify those who participated in the murder, those who got away. A few of them made deathbed confessions. And of course, now we're sitting here talking about Carolyn Bryant. On the federal angle, I can honestly tell you what basically handicapped the Justice Department for pursuing this. And I don't co-sign from no institution. I'm just saying, I have to speak facts here. What held us back was the statute of limitations on civil rights, civil rights at that time. But they did a thorough investigation. And when they did this investigation, they handed over their findings to the state and the DA. And it's in the, when the DA has the case, it is that person who is in charge to present this case in front of a grand jury. And of course, it's a grand jury of Carolyn Bryant's peers, right? Of their peers. The most corruption that we have, and the biggest thing that kept forcing me to hit a dead end wall with not just the Emmett Till case, but many other cases that I've worked on, was the fact that when this case is presented in front of a grand jury, it is not presented in the proper manner. I used to believe, and those of us in the legal community, those of us who work in the legal world, right? I used to say a DA can indict a ham sandwich if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that a saying? I'm making something up.
No.
I believe if the case was handled properly, and I wasn't in the grand jury hearing, we could have possibly had an indictment. And the reason being is because we have enough evidence against Carolyn Bryant. It is what I've always felt. It is if the individual, whether it's the DA or the grand jury, the jury of their peers, if they have the courage to do it.
That's right. That's right.
I have not seen, I used to believe, I have not seen a jury that had a courage to do it. So I am so frustrated because it's crazy to hold this knowledge of the case and know that there is enough evidence to convict this woman. And the only reason why she is not indicted is because she's an 80-something white woman. I have watched throughout my career Nazi war criminals at 9 years old being rolled out in wheelchairs.
Brought to justice.
Why can't we never see that when it comes to people of color and, with the experiences that we have? That's a question, but at the same time, our problem lies on the state and local level. We cannot trust that civil rights murders of our past, or even today, could be entrusted in the hands of local and state. That's where the most corruption is. And this is why the Emmett Till anti-lynching legislature is so important to get passed. Because if we had that in place, Ahmaud Arbery case would automatically went to the Justice Department. We also would see some protection with unsolved civil rights murder cases. But we still have a chance. I do not want us to lose hope. I know we may not ever see courtroom justice. Over the years, I have to say, my whole definition of justice have changed many times. I used to be bloodthirsty when I was younger. I used to always want to see justice done truly in this country. I mean, courtroom justice, seeing someone thrown underneath the jail. But now I have grown a lot. Now I don't have Mrs. Mobley with me anymore. Now I don't have Mr. Simeon Wright with me anymore. A lot of the players, which is breaking my heart, who was once at my side, is not with us anymore.
I'm frozen.
And so that's the major frustration that I have, but I don't want us to lose hope. We still have a chance. Hopefully, DA Richardson has the courage. I mean, we thought the same when Joyce Childs was there. And I remember I made a comment in the media and she blew up on me and was upset. And of course, that case didn't turn out the way we wanted. But I'm not just beating up on the South or on the local level. I do not believe on a national level, we are not prepared or we will ever receive justice for the murder of Emmett Till. And that's a bad way to live. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't let the Justice Department go. I mean, the Justice Department can co-indict with them. I mean, it can co-prosecute. It's allowed under the Emmett Till legislation and in previous authority. The Justice Department can use its resources. It can mobilize the FBI in support of these cases, and it has not done that. In fact, I've talked to a number of district attorneys who said, give me the case, but the Justice Department comes in and says, this is our property. And it's kind of appalling way to state it. But it may not be the case in the Emmett Till, but did they give all the support that they needed after your time, Mr. Killinger? I think that the Justice Department has the power, it has the money, you know, and they needed to distribute the information on the Emmett Till legislation that there was money for local prosecution. These DAs did not know that. They did not know that they could get money from the Justice Department, and the Justice Department would tell us, don't tell them that. Don't tell them that.
I'm just having a hard time, I have to be honest, about the praise fest for the government apparatuses. I think we gotta step back, we gotta walk back from that and talk about the fact that there were opportunities that were intentionally missed because of a lack of will and a lack of courage on the part of folks who are elected to protect us instead of throwing us to the dogs the way they've done. Now, I can say that because I don't have a dog in the hunt, and I don't have to be diplomatic. I'm just saying that that's true. And I will fight you. I will street fight you, Keith Beauchamp, on this notion that there was no conspiracy. We have to go to know on that because I am sorry. And I'll fight you, Janice, on the fact of a statute of limitation. I did my homework. I'm a legal scholar too. I did my homework on accessory after the fact in connection with a murder. There is no statute of limitation on, and that's what she was charged with. Accessory. Good. Why couldn't they get her on the charge that she was originally charged with?
Right.
But she was arrested on. Okay, you may not be able to get her on everything, but what about accessory after the fact and during the fact? What about that part?
If she pointed him out too, if she identified him.
Of course she did. She identified.
Yeah.
Well, Del, please tell them what the charge was, because it was culpable negligence. So she didn't really have to physically be present to point out.
You're going on the assumption that there were no charges based on the warrant. The original warrant, she was charged with accessory. After the fact, aiding and abetting in a kidnapping. Right? So I'm just asking, how come, since there's no statute of limitations on at least one prong of that, how come they can't get her for that? And I think you said why, Keith. I think you explained why.
She's an old white lady.
No, that's not what he said. No,
there's a big difference between what they tried to do or didn't do.
Improperly handled from the start.
I think Del is speaking. Go ahead.
I'm just saying there's a big difference on that particular warrant. It's issued in 1955 that we can't find, and what was available in 2004 or 5. So there's a big difference there.
Well, I'm not even, I wasn't asking you, Dale. I'm telling you that Jim Hood told me to my face that she couldn't be gotten. And I'd be remiss if I sat here on this phone knowing that the top cop at that time said she could not be gotten. And that was like stunning in that room full of Black folks at the Masonic Temple where Medgar Evers' office was. That was a stunning thing that he said at that meeting. And nobody believed it. Nobody believed what he said, that there was no way to get her. And now she's 80-something, but she was not 80-something when she sat in the back of that car seat and her husband said, "Is this him?" And she said, yes. She was a young woman. She was in her 20s.
She was 21.
At this time, I'd like to invite some of the other panelists to jump in. I see we have Ray Metoyer with us. Ray, would you like to jump in here? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the film that you produced on this subject. I think your mic is off, Ray.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you now, Ray.
Okay. I don't usually have to do the audio myself. But anyway, how are you doing? You guys have a very spirited conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm a person who did the documentary Who Killed Emmett Till, which was a compilation of all the things that had happened after Keith got the case reopened. So we went back, we did some other things about it, but we advanced the story, including covering the fact that Keith had gotten the case reopened and what he had done. Then we took it another step forward, which is also one of the documentaries that they show. At the time, I was working for the Black Family Channel, which is a Black news operation here in Atlanta. And I didn't have to ask any white people if we needed to do this story. We just did it. We followed it all the way through from the time the case got reopened. We interviewed Deborah while she was actually running for Congress, talking about she was running for Congress for Emmett. And we even followed them as they did a ceremony for Emmett Till in Chicago on the 50th anniversary. But you asked the question of, do I think Emmett will get justice? And I know you guys are coming at it from different directions, and I didn't hear what you said before, but I'll say this briefly. Until I lived in the South, I didn't understand these people. And I've been here since 94. The Emmett Till case, for me, coming from the North, I have to remember my mom was from Mississippi. They grew up in New Albany, which is not far from Money, Mississippi. They were scared the whole time they were in Omaha. And I didn't understand that till I moved down here and I actually went to Mississippi to work on the Emmett Till case and drove through those bayous at night. It's scary. But what I also didn't understand until I started doing the research is the amount of hate that is connected to that period of time and even now. The Brown versus Board of Education decision in '54 was the thing that they were outraged at, and poor Emmett came to town right after that happened. But I didn't realize at the time was that all of the Southern Confederate states, in defiance of the Brown versus Board of Education decision, put the rebel flag as their state flag all throughout the Confederacy. The state of Mississippi just finally got rid of those, but didn't have those flags flying until after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Also in 1956, the state of Georgia authorized the creation of a monument at Stone Mountain, which is a monument to the Confederacy that's carved on the side of a mountain. That's right. And they are still fighting to keep those monuments. They're still fighting to keep these street names all throughout the South. And they keep saying, this is our legacy. This is our heritage. But they're saying that this is our history we grew up with. But what they're not admitting is that the Civil War was about slavery. The Civil War was about white supremacy. And they still are engaged in that mindset. We're seeing it now. The only way this is ever going to be properly handled is if it's out of the state of Mississippi's hands and the federal government does it, as you've been saying it. But the hate is so deeply entrenched by a group of people who've been running the Confederate states, the former Confederate states, including here in Georgia. It is very tough to expect to get justice for a case that happened then, let alone now. We're having trouble getting justice for cases now. I mean, the state of Georgia just recently passed a law that made it illegal to take down monuments to the Confederacy. And Atlanta, the state capital is in Atlanta. You know, I mean, Atlanta's 70%, 60% Black. When the state of Georgia changed their flag from the Stars and Bars flag, which is the same flag that the KKK flies, they said, okay, we'll change the flag. Well, what they changed was to another Confederate flag, just one that wasn't associated with the KKK. So that's the mindset of the people we're dealing with. They will never admit they did anything wrong, not only in the Emmett Till murder, but in all the lynchings and murders and hate that took place for that reign of terror from the day we were freed up until now.
Mm-hmm.
John?
Yes.
Miss Flonzie Brown wants to speak, and I believe Ray has transitioned actually the conversation too from historical perspective, and I'd like for her to speak next and about her involvement and where she is today. She's one of the Emmett Till generation folks that I think has seen a lot, knows a lot, and can, I think, add some texture to this conversation.
Absolutely.
So John, can you call on Miss Flonzie Brown, right?
Please, is she on?
Yes, please unmute yourself.
Ms. Brown?
Okay, I'm texting them now to unmute. Okay, I shouldn't say that. Sorry. Okay. Oh, here we go. I'm not hearing her. And I'm wondering if Ms. Brown, right, can you speak right now? We can hear you. Okay. Well, I think they are having some technical difficulty. And I think we've heard from everyone except for one person that's with us now. John. Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just looking at another panelist there, but
Akinele Umoja.
yeah.
No, he's not with us right now. We have Melissa with us.
Hey, can you hear me?
Melissa,
Yes.
oh,
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here tonight and inviting me on. My name is Melissa Earnest. I am a civil rights advocate. I am also a social justice, I guess you could say, advocate, and I'm a mother. I'm a social media influencer, and I actually grew up in Drew, Mississippi. I grew up 3 miles from the shed where Emmett Till was murdered. And from a very young age, my mother began to educate me on Emmett Till. And in that area particularly, in Drew, you don't hear much about Emmett Till. It's almost kind of like he's a secret and people don't want to talk about him. And it's really, really sad. But I'm very thankful that my mother shared with me the story of Emmett Till. And as I became older and more aware of the civil rights injustices that were taking place in Mississippi and abroad, I wanted to become more active. And the death of Emmett Till and the injustice of others is what inspired me to pursue my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And back in 2016, one night I was sitting down and I just felt very inspired to write the President of the United States a letter about Emmett. And I wrote a 10-page handwritten letter, and then I converted it into type form. I did a cover photo for it, and I also paid extra to have it signed for. And I had a friend who I had known for quite a while, and she actually had a friend who had a relative that worked for the president. And there is a certain security that they have to go through and sort the mail out and that type of thing. And this friend told me that she would contact the relative that worked at the White House, and that this relative would actually go down to the mailroom herself and put it on the president's desk. So in mid-October of 2018, I received a notification to my phone that a White House staff member had signed for the letter. And a few days later, it was confirmed to me that that letter made it on the president's desk. I was not there, but it was confirmed to me that it was. And I know a lot of times that White House staffers will send automated responses and that type of thing. And I never checked my mail on a daily basis until after I sent that letter. And, months passed by, 2 months passed by, and I know I'm nobody special, but, I just thought maybe I'd get an automated response that my letter had been received or something along those lines. And, wow, it's been almost 2 years since I sent that letter. And I used to be a Republican, and sending that letter really started to change my mind about things. And I also had other people who found out about me writing that letter reach out to me and let me know that they too never got a response, any type of response about their letter regarding Emmett from the White House. And that is what really started to change my mind. And as a former resident of Drew, Mississippi, having grown up there for 18 years of my life, And being a resident of Mississippi, I think it is absolutely disgraceful that we sit here. It's sad that we are having to sit here tonight and have this conversation over half a century later, wanting justice for Emmett Till. It is sad, it is disgraceful. And, you know, I really believe that if Emmett had been white, we would not be sitting here tonight having this conversation. And it is disgraceful and sad, and I hope and pray that very soon he will receive the justice. He and his family will receive the justice that each of you deserve, because we should not have to be having this conversation here tonight. There should have already been justice from the get-go.
Thank you, Melissa. Deborah, I was just wondering if there were any more questions from the page.
Yes, there are. Looks like I'm frozen, maybe. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. One thing I do want to say, though, regarding Melissa, we want to see your face.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Sure,
But
hang on one second.
Yeah. And then, because, you know, I think when we engage like this, which is such a blessing that we can do from a technological perspective, that, and I just appreciate her being a mother of 4 and sticking her neck out there and doing some things in that area that you all described, which still has some of the same ghosts, some of the same haunting, racist people and perpetrators that are still there, and their ancestors are there, or their next generations are there. So I applaud you, Melissa, for being courageous and reaching out to me early on. And we just kind of kept our relationship going. And when I first met her, she was wearing a MAGA hat, right, Melissa? Not that I was
Yes,
trying
ma'am.
not that I want to embarrass you or anything like that, but I said, you
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
if you're speaking the same heart to heart that I'm speaking,
Right.
it doesn't matter from a political perspective right now when we're
Right.
all speaking the same language
Right.
of justice for Emmett Till. So that's what matters to me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So
ma'am.
but I do understand where your heart might be now.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
The other, thank you. The other question that we have is, someone said, I knew Mr. Simeon Wright. He had a great spirit, and this family deserves justice. So we do have questions and comments. So the other one said that, let's see, because they tried to answer the question because of white America, unfortunately, is why we haven't received justice. And you know, that sounds okay. I mean, to use that, but I think we have to go deeper than that, because as I think Dale said earlier, you know, these systems and these layers of systems, I think, are preventing us from getting justice, the systemic racism that still exists and other things like that. Let me find another one here. Someone said, I'm not sure of the state of her mental condition, but if it is anything like that and the condition of Edgar Ray Killens, one of those who was behind the murders of the 3 civil rights workers, she can be brought to justice. That was a comment. And then the other one, let's see here, let's see, is exactly why we need more minorities. Well, someone said we need more minorities working within the system and giving our youth and young adults tangible ways to help and get involved and to inspire them to choose a legal system and a career that's similar. What do you all think about that in terms of the people that are currently in? They get elected, they stay for a long period of time, and things have not changed.
Well, we need accountability for sure. And we've learned, if we've learned anything, that often it doesn't matter what color your skin is. If you're in authority and you believe in the system that hurts Black people and other oppressed people, you're not going to be helpful. You're not going to be helpful. You are going to stand in the way. and you're going to support the status quo. So we don't just need people who are not white in these positions. We need people who are not white in these positions who represent the point of view that the masses of people who suffer represent. And often we don't see that. Often we do not see that.
I think we're also talking about the need for term limits, both on the state and local level. I think that there's too many people in Congress that have been there forever. And I won't even go any deeper than that, although John Lewis was there a long time and we needed him, but there are a lot of people that have just been there. And as many people say, they go in poor and they come out millionaires. How's that happen? You know, what are they invested in? But I will say this, and I'm glad Melissa is a part of this conversation too, and everybody else too, because all of us know that white people were outraged at Emmett Till's murder too. It was one of the reasons why the civil rights movement got started the way it did, as we all know. And that was what led to all of the integrated effort to try to come down to the South and do something about it. As one of the historians that we talked to earlier, and I can't think of his name, but when the documentary we did, he was he was there at the reunion that you did in Chicago. He said there was a reign of terror in Mississippi. The KKK was running everything. And there were a whole lot of white folks that were scared to death of them too. They were afraid to speak up, which is part of what Martin Luther King said back in those days. If just the good people would stand up and say something. And there were so many people afraid to speak because they didn't want those guys to come rolling up to their houses at night with torches burning. To this, the whole time my grandmother was in Omaha, she said, get away from the window, turn out the lights, close the drapes. She was born and raised in Mississippi. She was like, she just knew the patty rollers or the KKK was going to come running. There was a reign of terror. There was a reign of fear that not just applied to Black people, but applied to the good white folks who tried to stand up too. Janice, she trying to talk and she's muted.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I think that it makes a difference. You're saying that the people that stood up, but if they didn't stand up, if they allowed these things to go on, I don't think we can call them good people, because I don't think we can call the police who are silent now and who are being called good people they're not good people if they know that something is going on and they're hiding behind whatever their fear is. They're allowing people to get murdered and no accountability. You got to stand up for something in this life. And I just really can't say that despite the fact that there was the terror there was, that the white people who were so silent allowed that system of oppression to go on with their benefit, to their benefit, that made them okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do we have another panel?
None of us have really lived in fear like that. I think it's a different situation today than it was.
I live in fear every day for my Black son going out on the street and being stopped 30 times before he's been thrown down, he's been shackled. Hey, it is a fear. This system today is not much better.
And every year we remember Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, and narrative that's read about what happened when they were led into that area in Neshoba County off the beaten path. And James Cheney looked up and he recognized one of the white men as a school official from his high school. You know me, I'm James Cheney. Don't you remember me? James Cheney and the other two young men were all murdered, make no mistake about it. But James Cheney was lynched. He was beaten first, savagely beaten, and then he was shot. The other two were instantly shot. And so this notion of white folks, I think we have to be clear on what kind of white folks we're talking about. White folks who are class allies, white folks who understand suffering because they understand that their people suffer and they're champions for the cause. That's a particular type of white person. But a white person who's a beneficiary of the suffering and the wholesale slaughter of our people, and then now saying, oh, I feel bad, I wish I had said something. I agree with Janice. I think we can't let them off the hook. And I also don't think we can glorify those who are not white, who also had a duty and a responsibility and were not and have not been accountable to our people. I think we have to give them equal time in terms of making sure that they go to the house, as we say here in Mississippi. They just need to go to the house. We need a Marquise, this young man that spoke as a panelist earlier. We need young revolutionaries to come forward and run for these offices and take these seats and stand up tall in the houses of government until the system can be changed. Because obviously this system brings nothing forth for us. But while we're in it, while we're forced to be in it, we need leadership that has courage and that will stand up. We need more Keith Beauchamps telling the story of what happened to our people. We need you, brother, telling the story. We need journalists. We need people who are responsible enough and brave enough. And yeah, I've been followed. I've had death threats in my life. I didn't have a cell phone at first until I was followed one night in Baldwin, Mississippi, Prentiss County, after a meeting to try to get people their sewage and water rights back. The sewage system was not functioning properly and they had paid, and we were trying to get their money back, and the Klan was meeting next door at the firehouse. I was followed all the way to the lighted area of Highway 6 when I pulled into the BP to stop from being followed, and the guy tips his hat and drives on. That's the next day I got a phone, and after that I got a pistol. So I'm just saying, we all have experienced terror, but our privilege sometimes shields us in ways that our people are not shielded. And why we do this work is for that reason. And so everybody on here, I just thank you for what you're doing. And I say, let's continue to fight the fight. Let's don't let them off the hook. Let's don't be dismayed by any decisions that they might be making, because they never had us in mind in the first place and for our people, except to work for free. And if we protested, to hang from a tree and be strange fruit. That was the plan all along for us in this country. So anything we do that steps away from that plan, I say, let's do it.
Well, I think we have to take some pride in the fact that with all the things that have happened, the state of Mississippi actually decided they were the final Confederate state to say, we're going to change away from that stars and bars flag. That's significant. I mean, for those people to say that, because they were not going to get rid of it. I mean, the school is still, University of Mississippi is still a rebel. I mean, that is a beginning.
It was litigated that they were supposed to get rid of those mascots and the trappings. That went to court, and they told them, you can't call it Ole Miss anymore. You can't use the rebel symbol, but they still have the damn rebel bookstore. Okay, and they send you letters on the letterhead that still says Ole Miss, even though there were court actions to say that these are badges and incidents of slavery.
Old habits die hard.
Old habits die hard, indeed.
Just one thing I do want to say, to your point, what we need every person on here that has the kind of expertise that they have, the kind of consciousness that they have, the kind of courage that they have. And I'll tell you, I think the families are missing in a lot of these conversations. And it's going to be my job to make sure that they have a voice. They can speak for themselves. They can talk about their experience. They can talk about their loved ones, bring them to life, and then also talk about what they want. And I think that's typically missing. And I'm just incredibly grateful that all of you on here have been willing to join with me, and that we join up and use the access, our platforms together. This is a great start and an example. I think that we can demonstrate even to other families. I do know that even with John Beasley, our esteemed actor, writer, person that has a public platform, for him to take this on also says, like others like him, and like Tay Diggs and others, Anjanu Ellis, Danny Glover, who are wearing our Justice for Emmett Till t-shirt that some of you even have. We know that it's going to take all of us. And this is where the beauty is. Not one element is any more important than the other. They're all important. I'll put it like that. So we do need the filmmakers. We need the investigators with consciousness. We need the attorneys, the professors that are pouring into the lives of our young people. We need the actors and actresses and other athletes that have a platform, and people are stepping forward today. You know, they're using their voices and their platforms. We need the Melissas who are having a change, or at least are inspired by wanting the truth and wanting justice, making no difference what political party you're in, or where you may live, or where you were born, and where you were from. We need people like Flonzie Brown, who is trying to get on, who was a part of the Emmett Till generation, who saw things, who can pour that knowledge into us and can share with us the path we need to go forward in, because she's had a tremendous background. She is still forging and making a difference in the world, in her community, and also in the world. And we need people like Akinele Umoja, who is hosting this on her YouTube channel, who has some technical experience, but also is a cousin of Emmett Till as well. And so we're calling on people like yourselves to be a part of this journey for us. And I don't want Keith to think he's by himself, you know, and I've called him and we've stayed connected, but Keith, this isn't just your journey. You know what I'm saying? Alone. And I've said that to you. And I know it can feel heavy. It can feel like there's no end. But I want you to also think about our family as well. I'm standing on the shoulders of Mamie Till Mobley, and proudly, and there are others of my cousins that are doing the same thing. And so just know we appreciate all of you and your work and being here today. And Dale, you know, there's some tough questions that were asked, but I'll tell you, and you're handling them, but it's tough times for all of us. And as long as we're transparent and can be as authentic as possible, I think we can really make a difference. I love this team. I love what I'm feeling and seeing, and I'm counting on each of you to join us on this Justice for Emmett Till journey. Now we have and I'll let John do the introduction.
Yes, we have Ms. Brown who's just joined us, and I would love to hear from her at this time.
Well, good evening, everybody, and it's been a journey trying to get on, but hello, everybody.
Hello.
I first want to certainly express my appreciation to the moderator, to Keith Beauchamp, the Emmett Till family, for keeping his life, his death, and his legacy alive before the world. Mrs. Till, I had an opportunity to meet her. And so the question is, would there be justice for Emmett Till? And we've talked about a number of very, very, very important things. But I just want to raise before the group tonight that we're living in an atmosphere where unless we just keep fighting, and it is a fight, justice for brown people is just not a reality. But to the question, positively, there can be justice for Emmett Till. But the question is, will there be? But there can be. And I say there can be because those of us who've been on these front lines for many years, I've been doing this for 57 years, we have to keep on working. We have to keep on fighting. And certainly the vote is the key to all of everything that we do. I want to just kind of make remarks on a couple of issues. When they talked about the lady was too old, she had children and all of that. But see, she should have thought about that before she told, well, you know, I shoot straight from the hip, y'all. And I'm an old-fashioned girl. I've been in this a long time. She should have thought about that before she told that loud Emmett that whatever she said he did when she wrote her book, she said now he did not do it. And so she should have thought about if she lived long enough, she was going to get old. But the issue was she was a white woman with children. We are in an atmosphere and have been in an atmosphere ever since we came to this country many, many, many years ago. Just think about, at one point, Black folk were not even considered 100% human beings. We were considered something else. And then later on, the 3/5. And I don't know what we consider now. But again, it gets back to those of us who really understand the issues around racial injustice. We have to keep on pressing on. And I really want to compliment Keith Beauchamp, and I've had him at New Hope Baptist Church for one of our Black History sessions. And I want to commend him. And I know he does get discouraged sometimes. We all do. I'm 78 and I get discouraged sometimes. But then there's a little inner voice in me that says, you got to keep on going, because every generation, this is from my perspective, every generation has an assignment. Every generation has an assignment. Our ancestors and foreparents brought us as far as they could bring us. And then we have brought this generation, another generation, as far as we could bring them. And it's up to people like Keith and people like Miss Deborah and others, those of you who have spoken, to continue to keep before the world the injustices that we face as people. And as I was doing a lecture some years ago, and someone asked me if I thought that that America would really ever be free of racism, and I said no. And they wanted to know why I said no. And I'm not a radical, but I said no. Because you have to remember, we came to this country in ships and boats. We were the riders, and they were the drivers. So how do you bring those two groups of people together to talk about equality? It can be done, but the question is, will it be done? And certainly, I remember 1954 very, very well, because that same year, I had two first cousins who were killed in a similar manner as Emmett, dragged to death by the Klan. Two Black boys walking down the road, going to a neighborhood store. Truck pulled up full of Ku Klux Klan, where your boys are going to the store, hop on, we'll take you. And they took my cousins out in the woods, beat them, chained them to that truck, and drugged them until they were almost decapitated. I had an 18-year-old grandson shot 15 times by the police until he was dead. So, you know, we're in an atmosphere, and certainly I just learned today that the Justice Department has closed the Emmett Till case. But we shouldn't be surprised by that, because the atmosphere that we're in today does not tell us that we will receive equality, equal justice under the law, because there's little disregard to the law from where I see. But yet I still hold on, because I do believe that if we keep pushing, if we keep before the world, your world, the need for racial justice, that at some point it will happen. But we have to keep going. The key to all of this is the vote. A little bit about myself. I'm from Madison County, Mississippi, and I am the first African-American female to be elected to a public office in Mississippi post or pre-Reconstruction. In 1968, I had the nerve to believe that I could defeat a white man who had been in office for almost 40 years. But because the community support, and because I knew that what I was doing was the right thing to do, I thought that I would certainly do it, because I knew that people needed the opportunity to vote, to register without interpreting the Constitution, without having to count how many bubbles in a bar of soap, how many feathers on the chicken, all that foolishness. And so what I'm saying is that we cannot give up. We will not give up, because it's not in our DNA. Because if we give up, then we do a disservice to Mrs. Till. We do a disservice to Emmett Till, to Medgar Evers, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And so certainly, I just wanted to make those comments that we're in an atmosphere where it is going to be more and more difficult for African Americans, for people, brown and Black people, to receive justice. And this isn't something that just happened. We have been fighting all of our lives just to be recognized and just to be given the opportunity that other people have been given.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you got a chance to get in with us tonight.
I was struggling. I mean, listen, I was determined. I was determined. I'm going to turn this laptop upside down. I'm going to get.
Don't feel like the Lone Ranger. I was fighting to get on too.
Listen, but I want to thank all of you for your comments.
Problems.
Yes, I want to thank all of you for your comments, and especially to the FBI investigators. They are killing her. I remember the day when the FBI could only, if we were going to have a march, if we were going to have some kind of demonstration, they could only look and take notes. They could not actually interfere with what was going on a local level. But I am proud to say that I'm a graduate of the FBI Academy in Jackson, Mississippi. And so I've learned a lot about how and why certain things did and did not happen. And I pay great tribute to John Doerr, who was our representative for the FBI. And so, but I pay tribute to all of you, because again, we're in this struggle together. I did a TV show for, I think, Representative John Lewis a few weeks ago, and they called me today to do something on Emmett Till. And I said, well, I'm doing a Zoom with the family tonight, so I can't be on y'all's TV today. But anyway, but bottom line for me, unless and until, and I'll repeat that, unless and until people are willing to come together and leave those isms at the doorstep and see me as equal to anybody, then justice cannot happen. Because if you bring that foolishness to the table, then you cannot speak from an optimistic standpoint. So unless and until we vote, all those millions of people who stayed home 40 years ago, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And so, because again, it's a mundane topic, but voters elect and select judges. They elect and select presidents. They elect and select people who are going to be lauded over you. And while I was on that election commission, I had to sue my board 5 times because there were 3 whites and 2 blacks, and I won each time. So again, we stand in solidarity for Emmett Till and for all of those Black and brown brothers and sisters, Breonna Taylor, who have been mowed down, cut short of their lives because of entrenched racism. No, I don't know how many of you believe in the Bible, but anyway, there's a scripture that says you can do wrong for so long until you think it's right. And so this is what I'm talking about, an atmosphere where people don't see me equal to a woman who's not of color, even though in my hometown of Canton, 20 miles from me, I got so many white cousins up there, it's ridiculous. But they don't see me, and I don't want to be seen. But what I'm simply saying, we came here, our sisters were raped, our women were raped, just to try and get equality in this country. And so I stand with all of you, particularly Keith. Don't you give up, young man. Don't you stop the fight for Emmett Till and Mrs. Till. And when you get discouraged, remember what brought you into this fight in the first place. And I guarantee you that energy will come back.
Thank you so much. Keith, you are an incredible filmmaker, and you just a great teller of the story. Deborah, I'd like to turn this over to you at this time. We had talked about originally maybe giving each panel member maybe 3 minutes to talk. I don't think that would have worked. It was just a great conversation. Deborah?
Yes. I am, first of all, just thank you to all of you for participating in this. This is our first time doing something like this, but I'll tell you, there were other plans from a higher place, if you will, that were made for us to make a reality, and that's why we're sitting here today, with storms raging all around us, with flights being canceled, events being canceled, a huge pandemic that's killing people all over the country, tornadoes, hurricanes, and other things are really impacting us. We are in a storm, but through that storm, it's going to take the kind of courage that each of us have to move things forward. And I think there are people that are watching today, and I'm hoping that they're inspired by what they're hearing. And I hope they don't give up hope either, and that they join Keith, they join me, they join Dale, they join Janice, because she's doing some incredible work there too. They're joining Dr. Flonzie Brown Wright, who we had to hear her voice tonight. Just incredible. We have incredible people that are doing work and continuing. We're going to join up with Ray Metoyer, who's another incredible filmmaker and writer and journalist, you know, who has a wonderful history and background, his family as well. We all have stories to tell. Also to Jaribu Hill, you know, who's, gosh, I tell you, the fire that she can send through a screen, you know, I want it. And we need her to take a look at some other areas that our family needs to explore. And I think that there are some. And we need the Melissas, you know, who have the courage to move into a space and a place that may not be welcoming, you know, to her in her own town and people in her own town. And so you all have done a tremendous thing tonight by being a part of this. And John, you know, you too, you know, with taking this on and saying, yes, you know, I will do this. Dale, I don't think I may not have mentioned Dale. Dale, you too. You know, just being available and open, you know, to having this discussion. But I have to tell you, the fight's not over. The fight is not over. I'm not giving up. And my family is counting on us to keep forging ahead. And I'm hoping that as you have grandchildren or friends or cousins and others, I'm hoping my grandchildren are watching tonight. And they understand that if this ends with my generation, that they have an obligation and a responsibility to take things forward. So I know we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to hear first, John, just any closing remarks about what you've heard, where you think in terms of people in your, with your platform, what kinds of things can we expect them to do, or what kinds of things can maybe you help us, you know, with our outreach do with actors like yourself? I know not everyone's an activist, you know, and I know that that's not an expectation, but we think that people can make a difference wherever they are. Any thoughts on that, John? And then for everybody else, if you're comfortable with that, just some closing remarks, and we might have a chance to end a little earlier than we thought.
You know, I was ran out of Omaha in 1968 because I stood up to police brutality. I was harassed by the police and eventually had a young family and decided that with the threats that I was getting, in those days, they would put your name and your phone number and your address in the papers. And so you'd get all kinds of calls. Martin Luther King got it, you can get it too, and those sorts of things. So I've been in a struggle for a long time. I don't have any answers, but I know that, you know, it's important for me to still be a voice when I can be. And I'm just honored to be here, Deborah. I'm honored that you would ask me to moderate this show tonight. And I really thank you for your courage in the fight that I know that you've been involved in this for years, because you've been in contact with me for years, and I just admire what you're doing. I think
Can't unmute myself.
Do we just take the stage here?
yes.
Okay. I just want to,
Yes,
a couple
yes.
of things.
I'm sorry, my screen was getting stuck, but go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to emphasize a couple of points. I think we have to give teeth to the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Restoration Act. It was the last thing that President Obama signed pretty much before he left office. I don't think either of the administrations have done it justice. And I think we need to put some things in there and make it mean what it says. And so I would really urge us to think about getting a commitment from at least the Biden-Harris team about what they might do to make sure that the Emmett Till legislation has some teeth, and has some meaning, and there's dedicated people to give support to those FBI agents and to the people at the Justice Department and to the U.S. attorneys in their different jurisdictions. Also, another key point that I wanted to bring up was that there is an effort for revisionist history. There's an effort to say there was nothing, there are only maybe 100 people who were killed during the civil rights era. And they talk about the same people over and over again. And I think it's really important for us to fight that revisionist effort, to keep identifying all of these people, to name the names, Ms. Wright was saying about her two cousins. I think we have to name the names, and we have to keep them in front of people so that the past gets linked to the present with this effort. And so fighting that revisionist history is another important thing. And the only thing is, I think that Emmett Till has created his own form of justice. I think he's created a pathway that we can all, follow, because he keeps reminding us. He keeps reminding the other families that you can keep fighting. And I think the generations of the family have done that. And so they've given hope to other families. Keith's film, all these things give those families hope, and they keep going, and they keep doing, and we need to support them in that. So he's got a different pathway, but he keeps nagging us and reminding us that we need to keep working toward this kind of justice.
Hey, it's Dale. I'll hop in real quick. I don't consider myself an activist, but I do consider myself a student of our history. And I'm going to quote a couple of things that kind of summarize it for me, this societal problem that Emmett Till is an exemplar of. And these two quotes come from the 1968 Kerner Commission report that followed the 1967 riots. And that report, if you haven't read it, I haven't read the entire thing, but it's just phenomenal. And in the very intro, the very first quote, is that, quote, "What white Americans have never fully understood, but what the Negro can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it." And the second quote is from FDR, from the president. "The only genuine long-range solution for what has happened lies in an attack mounted at every level upon the conditions that breed despair and violence. All of us know what these conditions are: ignorance, discrimination, slums, poverty, disease, not enough jobs. We should attack these conditions, not because we are frightened by conflict, but because we are fired by conscience. We should attack them because there is simply no other way to achieve a decent and orderly society in America." I mean, when I read those things and I see what goes on around us today, and I think of Emmett, it all blends together, right? It's so many things we need to do to fix our country and our society, and we're one part of that. And I'm proud to be associated with you. So thanks for having me here.
And I'll just jump in and say that we can't continue to do business as usual. I heard somebody say, let's hold certain candidates accountable. Historically, we have put our faith and trust in one party as Black people. And historically, we have been betrayed every single time. If we tell the truth And while we're in this praise fest right now, which really should just be about dumping Trump, it's turned into a praise fest for people where records that they created that harmed our people are no longer even going to be discussed. And people tell you, oh, don't talk about them. Don't say this about them because we've got to get Trump out. Yes, we got to get Trump out. But we also have to tell the truth about what we expect and about the demand for accountability. And I don't see accountability coming from, to tell you the truth, from either party. I certainly don't see it coming from the Trump party, but I know that historically we have been lulled to sleep. After an election, we close off and go back in because we think now we're going to be protected. We're only going to be protected if we fight against the status quo. We are not just going to be protected because we elect people who are not as horrible as what we have now. We got to be accountable. We got to hold people accountable in those seats because we will get the orange man out. But then when we do, what comes next for our people? What comes next for oppressed people? What comes next? And the last quick thing I'll say is Janice and myself and other people's lawyers, we have an obligation to step up and expose the pimping that we see, the hearse chasing, not ambulance chasing because people are dead, the hearse chasing that we see where people are manipulating and really using the misery of families who are suffering so that they can make a buck and get a name for themselves and build their platform. I'm not that kind of lawyer. I don't like that type of lawyering. I don't even think it is lawyering. I think it's just what I said. It is a brand of pimping that's going throughout right now. It's most prominent right now. And we have to really, as lawyers who believe in a different type of lawyering, we have to step up and chastise our peers when they are engaged in that. And we are doing that. We're checking some folks and we're saying to them, we don't like what you are doing and you need to stop.
Well, my closing remarks, again, even though it took me some difficulty in getting on, I just want to commend my brothers and sisters on this panel this evening for all of your information, all of your comments, and all your perspectives. And just, I'm going to leave you with this thought, that as we move forward, we have the obligation to vote. It's not optional. We must go to the polls to vote for the dog catcher's dog catcher, if that's what it is. Number one. Yeah, oh yeah, the dog catcher's dog catcher. Because too many people pay too heavy of a price. I've been to jail. I've been shot at by the Klan, tear gas, life threatened, lives of my children threatened. But that didn't stop me because I knew that I was on the right side of history. But my closing comment is this. Let's remember that movements change, but commitments don't. Movements change, but commitments don't. We've been in a movement ever since we came into this country, but commitments don't. I want to thank all of you for your commitment to social justice and for a better America.
I'll jump in next. I just want to pick up on what you just said. We should celebrate the victory that we had today with the NBA players who have been standing up and standing out, boycotting and trying to make a difference and using their platform. If you haven't heard about it, they have gotten the league to open up the arenas that they're not going to be playing in for voting. It's
wow.
In a city like Atlanta, because we've had huge problems with people being able to get in and vote. State Farm Arena here is now going to be open for voting. It was open in the primary. So you've got 300 voting machines there that are up to date, plus free parking. You can go into the arena and you can wait inside, whether it's rain, whether it's hot, whether it's cold. So it is a significant effort by the NBA players who have taken the mantle and have run with this also. And we got to celebrate that victory because it is important for us to vote, and they made it easier for us to do it. And the only other thing I want to mention, and I want to deal with the historical part of it just one more time. I mentioned the Brown versus Board of Education decision as a jumping off point for hatred. in the 50s and 54. Keep in mind that was to outlaw segregation as the law of the land, especially with the school districts. It took over 20 years to even get that enforced. That story in Omaha, where they were trying to desegregate the public school system in Omaha. And if you look at cities all throughout the North, we can't just blame the South, all throughout the North fought with the desegregation of the public school systems. The separate but equal systems were fine as long as our kids were going to those schools and the white kids didn't have to go to them. White people refused to have their kids bus to our schools. Our kids had to go to their schools. This is in the North, this isn't in the South. And when they finally got it implemented, if you look at cities like Atlanta or other cities all across the country, white flight began when school systems were integrated. They left the inner cities, they went to other areas, they set up entirely new counties and subdivisions and school districts and took their property tax money and they went out there. And who makes money off of that? The realtors who were here selling their houses and the realtors who sold them houses out there. And now they're trying to come back and the realtors going to make money again. It's the economics of racism that is a part of this country that is also what we're up against. And that attitude isn't just in the South. There are still people who believe my kids are too good to go to school with poor kids. My kids are too good to go to school with black kids. Where does that come from? It comes from home. So we have a lot of work to do, but I agree with you. It starts with the vote, and we are seeing more people coming to our side because of the things that happen. So I'll end with that.
Thank you, Ray. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You know, I know we're into the closing remarks, but we've just had someone join us that I think has been traveling and has made a commitment to be with us tonight. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
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 Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, because my internet is not stable. But at any rate, Yusef Salam, could you unmute yourself? And thank you so much for joining in with us. Yusef is part of the Exonerated Five, and he's got an incredible story, incredible life that he's lived, experienced, and has always invoked the name of Emmett Till in every speech that I've heard him do. And I've been in audiences where I was sitting there and I would hear him say it. So Yusef, please share with us who you are, tell us more about who you are, and you can maybe speak to this question of, will there ever be justice for Emmett Till?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Yusef Salam. I'm one of the Exonerated Five. I was formerly known as a member of the Central Park Five until we were on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I like to say the Oprah Winfrey Show, you know, and she rebranded us. You know, it was a moniker that they gave us back then to really describe us, and we had never used it per se to describe ourselves. It was something that we accepted because they put it on us, you know. And you know, one of the things that really galvanized me to the front of understanding what this system was all about was that I was 15 years old when this tragedy happened to me, you know. And 2 weeks after I was accused, Donald Trump, who sits in the White House, took out a full-page ad calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty, specifically for my case. Now, I say that as a point of significance because he didn't create the ad 2 weeks after we were accused. He had been thinking about planning with his team, saying, yes, I like that design. No, I don't like that design. Let's go with that one right there. I'm gonna sign my name to that one. And 2 weeks in, this ad was ran in New York City's newspapers, calling for them to kill us. And I had no knowledge of Emmett Till back then. My mother used to tell me that she was raised in the Jim Crow South. And I kept not understanding what she was talking about because I kept saying to myself, man, you know, we in New York, like, Ma, you know, like I know you told us about slavery and racism and stuff like that, but because it was so covert, to me, it was non-existent. And it wasn't until that fateful day that I was awakened to what I would say Malcolm X called the American nightmare. You know, I submitted a video to be played at the march today, and I'm not exactly sure if it was played or not because I've been traveling around. I'm actually just getting into New York City right now. So that's why I joined the call later than usual. But, in my remarks, one of the things that I wanted to say was, we just had the death anniversary of Emmett Till. And Emmett Till being a 14-year-old child, we have to understand that he was a child. And as I know and have researched the story, he was accused of doing something, but the accuser came back just recently and said, "Hey man, I'm so sorry I made this story up." And the worst part about it is that the juxtaposition and the duality of America in this criminalization of youth and the criminalization of people with Black skin causes people to believe that when you have a person of color that's a suspect, that person is guilty and has to prove themselves innocent. But when you have the complexion for acceptance, as they say, you are given all the laws, all the rights under the law, everything is afforded to you. They show your prom photo as your mugshot. Whereas with us, they go through the process, as you've seen in the film When They See Us, for those of you that have seen it, they go through the process of wearing you down. And then after that, right? Raymond Santana was arrested April 19th. I wasn't arrested until April 20th with Corey Wise. Raymond Santana was being interrogated since the time that he was arrested on the 19th, all the way to and through the time that I was arrested on the 20th. And I say that as a point of significance because then when you see those mugshots, they're painting a picture. They're telling a story to the public that these folks look like this because they're crazy and we need to put them in jail. And the worst part too, on top of that, is you have people right after Donald Trump placed that ad in the papers, you had people like Pat Buchanan write in the papers in the New York Post, I believe it was. And he said, well, why don't we just take the eldest one, Corey Wise, and hang him from a tree in Central Park? This was written in the papers. Why don't we take the others and horsewhip them? Maybe this will make the city's park safe again. And on the heels of that were all of these letters of hate that were coming to my doorstep. Letters telling me and telling my mother that we were going to be fried in oil, that we should be castrated, that she didn't deserve to live for giving birth to me, and neither do I. One letter that I always pull out as a point of great significance, because it talks about time. This letter goes in and it says something like, some people, it ends, the letter ends by saying, some people will never forget. And maybe the one time that you don't check your back is the one time that somebody might just be there to say hello. And so under the cloud of that, I was given the awesome opportunity to go to prison for a crime that I didn't commit. And I'm describing it that way because I survived. I'm describing it that way because the Central Park jogger case became a love story between God and his people, allowing that case to put America on trial so that we could see as a people this duality where we were now revisiting the dream speech of Dr. King, right? The Dr. King, I have a dream speech. And people want to relegate him to the dream speech, but the beauty of the dream speech is that he is giving water to the seeds in humanity inside of us, allowing us to become the greatness that we are supposed to be, psychosocially reorienting us in society so that we know that we were not born as a mistake, but that we were born on purpose. And I usually say that I had to grow through what I went through as opposed to just go through what I went through, because it was important for me to understand who I am, where I am, why I am, what I am, and how I am. So that when it came time for me to show up in the world again, I showed up with the history lesson. This history lesson that Dr. Angela Davis said that we as a people have historical amnesia. And I don't believe that she was saying that as a point of putting Black folks down, but rather as a point of saying that the way we have been socialized as a people, we've been taught not to remember. We've been taught to never forget for others. But when it comes to the African Holocaust, when it comes to systemic oppression and white supremacy and white male dominance in this country, we've been taught, oh no, your case is just an anomaly. That's not how we do. We don't treat people like that. And then George Floyd happened. On the heels of all of these atrocities, which I truly believe, and I know Emmett Till wasn't the first, but what Mamie Till did in showing his body, not a closed casket, starting the civil rights movement, starting the human rights movement, calling people to see what they had done to a child of God. It became important for people to begin to stand up and put strength in their backs, to understand that this is a marathon. That if you want to go fast and by yourself, then you can go that, but you won't get that far. But if you want to go far, as the African proverb says, you go together. And I truly believe that in this moment in time, something real special is happening. And we can't lose sight and we can't give up on the promise of the sacrifice. And I don't want to say it that way, but we can't give up on the sacrifice that Emmett Till gave and that his family continues to give. He is the light that is showing the way for us to get out of this darkness. I never forget, last thing I want to say, my professor, I went to Hunter College when I came home from prison. And in 1997, I was returned back to the world and had a hard time because I was hiding in plain sight. I was over 6 feet tall, but I had this stigma, this indelible scar that people knew and felt like I was a rapist. And so it was difficult for me to navigate the world. And so I was hiding in plain sight, walking around on eggshells. And a friend of mine from years ago told me to go to Hunter College. There's a professor there named she told me Donna Richards. And so I go to Hunter College. I'm looking for a Donna Richards. I can't find Donna Richards nowhere. And so I'm knocking on the doors, but I don't want to go back to my friend without having done all that I could do to find Donna Richards. Couldn't find her. A week went by, 2 weeks went by. I said, man, I got to go back and ask her. I can't find Donna Richards. Can you give me more information? She said, oh, she changed her name to Dr. Marimba Ani. And I said, oh, okay, cool. As soon as I went back to Hunter College, it was like, Marimba Ani, she's right there, And so I came into this classroom, and now it's 1999. And I came into this classroom, and as soon as I walked in, she looked at me, and she said, I knew it. I knew you didn't do it. And she just grabbed me and hugged me. And it was such a booster shot of man, I'm all right, I'm okay. And then she told the people in the class who I was. And this professor who is described as the protege of Dr. John Henry Clark, she said to us one day, she said, if we decided that the system of oppression ends tomorrow, it ends tomorrow. My mother told me there's a scene in When They See Us that describes what really happened. My mother told me when she came into the precinct, she told me when she got me out of the clutches of the officers that were interrogating me, trying to get me to make a false confession. She said to me, stop talking to them. She didn't say to me, hey baby, how you doing? How they treating you? Do you need something to eat? Do you need some water? Are you okay? This mother who was my Harriet, my modern day Harriet Tubman. She said to me, stop talking to them. And then she said, they need you. I'm 15. She says, they need you to participate in whatever it is that they're trying to do. Do not participate. Refuse. She was teaching me about stand your ground. And she was also teaching me about the unification of self propels you to do bigger and greater things. You couple that unification with other like-minded people, you find your community. And when it comes time for all of us to put our shoulder to the grind, they need us to participate in the oppression that has been heaped upon us. But it's time for us to collectively refuse. And Emmett is showing the way. Emmett's spirit is still speaking. I mean, you see his picture, you see his face and all of the joy and the life and the vibrance that is still in that young spirit. That's in the world, you know? So that's my piece. You know, I didn't necessarily have anything specific to say, but I wanted to be here and to share with you in this moment. I thought it was significant, and I wanted to be, at least I came off the plane, got in the rental car, got to the hotel, got the children situated, and I said, I'm going into the next room, I'll be right back. But definitely, thank you all for listening. Definitely, peace and blessings.
Bless you, my brother.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
I'm trying not to cry, but they're tears of joy and tears of energy, you know, that's going to keep us going, because this has been incredible.
Absolutely.
You brought a spirit here and the right kind of message that we all need to hear, because we had just talked about working together,
Right.
you know. So I think it just fit perfectly, and we applaud you for your courage.
Yes,
And for the other brothers that were with you, because when they see us is just a really hard one to watch.
Yeah.
As Emmett's story is a hard one to watch.
Yes,
So there's so many synergies and similarities. Now, thank you. And I know that we're at the end, you know, it's 9:30, and someone said, you guys are going to be on there 2.5 hours. And look at where we are. Pardon me?
Thing before you end, one quick.
Okay, and I know we have a couple people who can give their closing remarks.
Thank
Go
Anna's
ahead.
mom, your classmate, shouting out to you. I haven't seen you since Selma, but just shouting out to you again. Love you. Love you.
Oh, blessings. Thank you.
Love
Thank you.
so much. So much. So much.
Thank you. Wow.
Daughter's classmate.
Yes,
Aw.
indeed.
Menard High.
Oh, man.
Did we had a couple more people that needed closing remarks. We'll try to keep it really short, please. But I'll tell you, if we could be here another 2.5 hours, I'll probably be by myself, but we would do it. But this is part one. Okay, this is part one. We're going to try to do this again. And so I'll be getting back with each of you and our audience as well to ask them, was this helpful? Was this educational? Was it important? Are they inspired to join us to continue this fight for justice for Emmett? Are they going to text Emmett to 243-725 and continue this march towards justice for Emmett? We are not giving up. So with that, there were a couple more folks that I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say closing remarks, because this has been incredible. You all have been wonderful. And I'm not sure who is missing. I think, go ahead.
I think I should say a few words. First, I want to thank Brother Salam for joining us and telling us your story. I mean, I don't think people realize the struggle that you've had, and I've been watching you from afar. I'm a huge fan, and to see that you're doing great things, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy that you didn't allow the system to break you down. And so you are a great living example of resilience,
Yes.
power. And so I thank you for being here. And Dr. Wright, I love you to death.
Same here, my dear.
You have known me from the start. I was this little kid running around talking about Emmett Till and trying to get a story told about him. I thank you for your words of wisdom. It is always great to be in your presence. I don't think people of my generation, and I'll say some, do not realize the value of having you and others who are a part of the movement still with us. And so I hope that while we're fighting in this Black Lives Matter movement, we will have a lot of us go back and get a little more history, a little more wisdom
Yes.
to keep us going, because I think that is something that is truly lacking right now. Sister Jaribu, you know, you're my girl. You mentioned someone I admire and I've met on a number of occasions, Amiri Baraka.
Yes. Yes.
He once stated that there's no justice in America. It is the pursuit of justice that sustains you.
That's right.
I live by quotes. All my whole career and this whole journey fighting to get justice for Emmett Till and to speak for the voiceless. Each year I'm inspired more by the quotes that I've read. That is something that is so, that quote is so, you know, it's so true in many ways. I've been doing this since I was 22 years old. I don't know anything else to do. I cannot switch my activism off. You know, this is something I live with day in and day out. Brother Salam mentioned, and I'm gonna end with this quote. You mentioned Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Dr. Lance Edmond, Dr. John Henrik Clarke's best friend, was a mentor of mine. And when you mentioned that, it just brought me back because I just lost him probably a good 4 or 5 years ago. He was once an advisor to Malcolm X, and he instilled in me so many things. But Dr. Clarke stated that no people are truly free until they become the instrument of their own liberation. Freedom is not to bequeath from one generation to the next. Each generation must take and maintain its freedom with its own hand. I live by that daily. I hope we all live by that as well. Thank you.
Well, Deborah, I think we've had all our closing remarks.
Oh, here we go. I think we have. This has been incredible. I want to just say again, this is part one. And I've been so inspired, even on this day. I don't know if all you know that the case for Emmett Till on the federal level, the Department of Justice decided to close the case today on the anniversary of his death. But also, this is an important day that Martin Luther King was recognized for the 57th anniversary. And I want to read something to you that where we know that there's this strong connection and synergy, because when he was called to speak about the unrest and to speak about the atrocities that were happening, he was moved by Emmett Till's abduction and murder. And he delivered a sermon just days after Bryant and Milam were acquitted. And it was called Pride versus Humility. And it was the parable of the Pharisees and the publicans. And it was he delivered this at the Dexter Street Avenue Baptist Church. And he talked about Emmett. He talked about the lack of our morals among violent segregationists. And here's what he said. He said, the white men who lynched Negroes worship Christ. That jury in Mississippi, which a few days ago in Emmett Till's case, freed 2 white men from what might be considered one of the most brutal and inhumane crimes of the 20th century. They worship Christ. The perpetrators of many of the greatest evils of our society worship Christ. This trouble that all people, like the Pharisees, go to church regularly, they pay their tithes, offerings, and they observe religiously the various ceremonial requirements. The trouble with these people, however, is that they worship Christ emotionally and not morally. They cast his ethical and moral insights behind the gushing smoke of emotional adoration and ceremonial piety. King. So he used that time and that momentum to try to create this outrage, which he did. The March on Washington, which we celebrate the 57 years today, and we tied that to the history of Emmett as well, his brutal murder, from history to the past, to the present, and the future. We're going to be moving forward. And so tomorrow, we're going to be marching from the Capitol in Jackson, Mississippi, to the steps of the City Hall, where we'll have a small program, but it's a march for peace and justice. Then we'll be going in a caravan up, as long as the weather works out for us, we'll be going in caravans up to the Delta area on the Till Trail of Tears and Terror. And so for anyone watching, you know, hopefully we'll have someone go live on Facebook. And there is also an app that I believe the Emmett Till and the Sumner and the Tallahatchie Commission there, the Memorial Commission has put together. And so we'll try to make that app available to you. So in case you aren't able to join us, or if the weather doesn't permit, we'll have a chance to join us in that way as well. So I just want to thank you all. I know we've gone over time, about 11 minutes or so, but this has been incredible. This is just the middle part of what we're doing in honor of Emmett, and you have done you've embraced our family, number one. You embraced the journey, and I know you're going to be working with us going forward. So I have a lot of hope, and we'll be praying for everyone's safety, security in this area of COVID, and also with any of your families as well. Please wear your mask, wash your hands often, and keep your distance from each other. So I'm gonna give you a COVID hug right now, all of you and our audience.
Not a COVID hug.
Not a COVID hug.
And I want to know, what are y'all doing on this plane? Youssef, what are you doing on the plane in New York? I mean, my God, God. Please, okay.
Oh yeah, let's put our masks on.
Be safe. Be safe, please. Be safe.
Be careful.
Listen, I'm coming out of Georgia, so I'm not in Atlanta. I'm not in Atlanta, but I'm in Stockbridge. But I had to go into Atlanta to get on the plane.
Oh my God.
And this was my second time traveling since COVID-19 hit. And I tell you, it's one of the most scariest times, but you know, as long as you do what you're supposed to do, you know, and you move in truth, one of the best things is knowing that you won't leave here until your job is finished.
That's right.
You know, and so I think you know, when I was my last time traveling, I was traveling out of British Columbia, speaking in Canada, and it was May 1st. No, I'm sorry, it was March 1st.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I think I might have, you know, because I didn't know what was going on until they shut everything down, and everybody was having a little bit of tickle in their cough, you know. I'm on a plane and people are coughing, and I'm like, man, this looks kind of strange. I'm not sure, you know, I'm asking to move, and they like, no, it's about the weight of the plane. It was a really interesting thing. But, you know, for the folks that are still out there just not covering up, not washing their hands, you know, I mean, just not social distancing, none of the stuff that, you know, you really should be doing in order to maintain safety, you know, because it would be a real atrocity for a person to just say, I'm okay, and just go out there, and next thing you know, you become like a, what's the guy named Herman Cain?
Remain the sellout. Look what happened to him.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
was skinning and grinning with Trump, and then look what happened.
Yeah.
See that?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we got to do what we got to do to maintain safety, you know, and I echo what Sister Deborah is saying, you know, definitely be safe and travel safe, and, you know, just keep all of that in mind and stay on point. I tell my daughters and my sons all the time. I got 10 children, by the way, but I tell them all the time, I say, listen, stay on point. Even if that's just crossing the street. Out here in New York, it might say one way, but you got to look the other way too, just in case, because it's serious out here, you know? So we got to stay on point. We got to do our due diligence. We gotta love each other. We gotta echo the words of Dr. Joanne Chesimard.
Yes, Asada.
AKA Asada Shakur.
Yeah.
We got the power to fight. We got the power to win.
Yes.
We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. You know? So, yeah.
Yay.
All right, thank you all.
everybody,
Thank you all.
being a part
Thank
of it.
you. This was good. This
Please
was
join
good.
us. We haven't finished, but we'll just follow us tomorrow, and we'll still continue this fight in this journey. Thank you so much. This has been incredible. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Adelia Carth and Dr. J, who was sort of the engineer for this. Please thank her. Give her a round of applause
Thank
too.
you, Dr. J.
And thanks to
Thank you.
all of you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.